Today was primarily ward stuff and then fun.
The ones that do are the get out the door.
Lift off, we're tensing.
Okay.
Tax clients are not sympathetic.
No. Have a nice life. Where's my?
Lights to Martian.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Wednesday, February 13th. The three candidates vying to be the next City of Chicago treasurer will face off.
There is an illegitimacy on his presidency. He didn't win any elections.
As Venezuela descends into a political and humanitarian crisis, Venezuelans in Chicago express fears and hopes for their home country.
The reality is there's no going back, and there's no such thing as again in the real world. We can't look for
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg is here to talk about his new memoir and why he's thinking about running for president. Bill Daley gets a major endorsement from mayor while hauling in big bucks. We look at that and other top political stories with our Spotlight Politics team.
Full-length ballet, 2-act ballet is being created on us from scratch.
And for the first time in its history, the Joffrey cues up an entirely new score for its daring new production. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Phil Ponce. Prepare yourself for pain if Illinois is going to get its finances on track. Amanda Vinicky has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Amanda.
Phil, Illinois has serious fiscal problems. Addressing that crisis will require serious action sooner than later. That's the message from the nonpartisan Civic Federation, out today with its annual fiscal roadmap that includes a call to restrict government spending. But like another business group, the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club, which recently suggested, the Federation is also advocating for new taxes.
There are a lot of hard things that need to be done. The Civic Federation is not proposing any tax increases or expansions on the burdens of Illinoisans just to make it hard on Illinoisans. We're doing it because we're not paying our bills.
The Civic Federation report suggests Illinois begin to tax at least some retirement income or place a sales tax on services. It's been a year since Chicago Police Commander Paul Bauer was killed in the line of duty. Officers and friends celebrated his life and mourned his loss at a memorial service today. Bauer was fatally shot at the Thompson Center as he chased down an allegedly gun-wielding suspect. Four-time felon Shamari Leggett faces trial for Bauer's murder. Say you can't make it to a Cubs game and want to watch your home team at home from your couch. Come 2020, it won't be on a traditional over-the-air local broadcast if all goes according to plan. The Cubs are, shall we say, making a trade. Instead of having some games on free TV, WGN or ABC7, the team is starting its own regional sports network with Sinclair Broadcasting Group. They're calling it the Marquee Sports Network. The plan is to have all Cubs game on this new cable channel, as well as other so-called unique Cubs content and other local sports programming. As for the weather, increasing clouds tonight with a low around 20, then tomorrow a chance of afternoon showers and cloudy with a high near 40. And now, Phil, back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. And don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also watch via podcast and the PBS video app. And now to Carol Marine and candidates for an office you may not know a lot about, but probably should. Carol.
That's right, Phil. Thank you. Amid the attention devoted to the crowded mayor's race, it shouldn't be forgotten there's another important citywide office with a contested election. 3 candidates are vying to replace outgoing city treasurer Kurt Summers, who has opted not to run for another term. The city treasurer's isn't necessarily a high-profile office, but it manages billions of dollars in city money and investments. This tonight is not a classic debate. There'll be no opening or closing remarks. Not all questions will be the same to each candidate. And while answers aren't being timed, I'll interrupt overlong responses in an effort to cover as much ground as possible for everyone. All 3 candidates who hope to be the next treasurer are with us tonight. Joining us, Melissa Conyers-Ervin, an Illinois state representative whose 10th district covers parts of Garfield Park and the near west side. Amaya Pawar, he's an alderman in Chicago's North Side 47th Ward. He is not running for re-election to the city council due to a self-imposed 2-term aldermanic limit. And Peter Garapi, he is a certified public accountant who also ran in the 2018 Democratic primary for Cook County Treasurer. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
So let's kick this off. And Representative Conyers-Ervin, let me start with you. There have been proposals over the years from civic groups and mayoral candidates to abolish this post, consolidate it somehow with another office like clerk. Why do we need an elected treasurer?
Because we need an independent treasurer. Taxpayers deserve to know the true story of its finances. The way that I envision being the next city treasurer, I envision that I will be an independent fiscal watchdog of taxpayers' dollars. If you abolish this office, you're not going to receive that. You're not going to receive the full story from the office of the mayor. We need this. We deserve this. When we look at the office of the city's treasurer, an investment banker, someone that's going to be managing our cash assets and pension fund, we need to make certain that someone is doing that has the skill, that has the education, and has a heart for the people.
Alderman Poir, do we need this office really?
I think we do. I think the crisis in our democracy is income inequality, and I think an independently elected official, someone who's an activist to shape financial policy, whether it be in the markets or launch a public bank, so that we can democratize how we use our dollars, where they're invested, how we refinance student loans. This is all essential, and I think an elected official versus a bureaucrat can bring that to the table. I think it's an essential office. I think it's an essential function. The trade-off for people is, do you want a bureaucrat making these decisions and lose the advocacy, or do you want an elected official who can do all of that?
Mr. Garapi?
No, we don't. The only requirement to run for city treasurer of Chicago is to be a registered voter with 12,500 signatures. I'm the only one here who is a licensed financial professional as a CPA. One of us will be the next city treasurer, and that's a frankly very scary prospect. We don't elect the Surgeon General of the U.S. You make sure that that individual is qualified. You just can't elect any judge you want. They have to be a licensed attorney. So it's a very scary prospect. I do agree with Lori Lightfoot, who proposed no longer making this an elected office.
So if elected, you would
I would agree.
lobby to abolish it?
I would agree with making sure that this office is no longer at risk for having an unqualified person. This is the first time this race is contested in 30 years. And I think there is a great risk that you don't have someone qualified to oversee an $8 billion portfolio.
So what would be your single top priority on day one, an action that you could immediately take without needing the city council approval? Can you name one?
Yes, I would make sure that we are actively pursuing focused deposits in community banks as well as credit unions which have a Community Reinvestment Act rating of outstanding or satisfactory, and then making sure that those deposits are bonded since they would be over the FDIC limit. That would be an injection into our neighborhoods where those are already established institutions, where we wouldn't have to set up another layer of red tape.
Alderman Farrar, what would be your first action that would not require city council approval?
I think it's about getting transparency in the fees that we pay to the big banks. and making sure that we let the public know why we need to launch a public bank, and also making sure that the Catalyst Fund, an initiative that Treasurer Summers launched, and propel that initiative forward, because it is really time to promote racial equity, promote investment in communities that have been ravaged by the racist war on drugs, seen disinvestment over the decades. It is time to use the Catalyst Fund to really propel the efforts of Kurt Summers and make sure that we're investing in communities of color.
Representative Conyers-Urban?
So I appreciate and acknowledge that I'm the state representative, but let me also make certain that we're clear of my credentials. Not only do I have a bachelor's of science in finance, I have over a decade of experience in the private sector. I have an MBA in finance. So as far as the most qualified individual on this panel to operate an $8 billion portfolio on behalf of the taxpayers, no one on this panel can match up to my credentials. That's number one. So as far as what I would do on day one, we want to make certain that we bring the CEOs of financial institutions before me. And we're going to talk about what are the plans to make certain that we address the capital and financing that's needed in the underserved communities. That's what we're going to talk about on day one.
The office's operating budget is what?
$8 billion of a portfolio.
No, the budget is not $8 billion. You only have 27 employees.
So actually, I think it's 31, and isn't it 4.1 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And the size of and nature of the current investment portfolio, Alderman Pawar, is what?
It's a little over $7 billion. And then about $25 billion in investments with the pension funds.
So in this staff and budget kind of situation that each of you seeks to manage, could you tell me, Mr. Garapi, the largest staff and budget you have to date managed?
For me, I've managed 10 employees. I was not personally responsible for their salaries because that then went up, but that was probably, I would guess, about $175,000 in salary where I managed.
Alderman Pawar?
Or sorry, I'm sorry, not 175, 1.75 million.
So I've been an alderman for the last 7.5 years. I represent nearly 60,000 people. I manage a staff of about 5 people. I've overseen economic development of nearly $500 million. And then I have an annual budget.
You mean as a member of the council?
No, $500 million in my ward alone over the last 7.5 years. And then we manage an infrastructure budget every year, a little over $1 million, and that doesn't include major capital projects and tax increment financing spending.
Representative Conyers-Urban?
So I think your question is directly, as far as management, what have we managed? So in corporate America, I have managed an office with over 130 employees, regional office of $16 million budget.
Okay. The job that you all are seeking is one that raises many issues about proposals. Alderman Pawar, you're talking about a public bank as one of your proposals, but I wonder, how would you fund that public bank?
So it depends on how you capitalize it, right? So right now, for example, pension funds invest in big banks. Could they potentially invest in capitalizing a public bank? Well, that's up to them. I think the best way to start is, one, recognize we can bank cannabis. When we legalize cannabis, those businesses cannot currently bank in federally chartered banks. If we were to launch a state-chartered municipal bank, the pool of deposits from businesses, which could be billions of dollars a year in revenue, could be used, again, to create real racial equity, capitalize the bank, and provide low-interest loans to communities that were ravaged by the racist war on drugs. You could use Catalyst Fund money to capitalize a bank. It's about limiting the scope. I see this as a way to finance affordable housing, to refinance student loans, and bank cannabis. It's a limited scope, but it's a good way to start.
And how much in cannabis funds are we talking about?
It's
really?
unclear how big the industry is going to be, but there is definitely a need to bank these businesses.
And pension funds might be a conflict of interest, wouldn't they, since the treasurer sits on the pension board?
Well, it's really up to the entire board to decide where they. Let's also be clear. Pension funds currently invest in all kinds of instruments, including big banks.
I know, sometimes well and sometimes poorly,
No doubt.
as we've seen in the city. Mr. Garapi, you have stated, as a licensed CPA, I will lead the treasurer's office to combat income inequality and poverty, but a CPA's license is not a social worker's license, and it isn't a public policy license. So how do those two things go together?
Sure, the CPA's job is as a financial steward, that you have met a bar set by the Illinois Department of Professional and Financial Regulation, that you have achieved a level of proficiency. And one of the things I do just want to clarify that Alderman Pawar has been clear about, to use our city pension funds to capitalize a bank whose deposits are then only guaranteed by the city's taxpayers. City Treasurer Kurt Summers was very clear when he spoke at the City Club to say, if you start doing this, you had better be prepared to foreclose on homes, repossess cars, place a lien on assets. And so in Alderman Pawar's proposal, with our pension funds emptied and with taxpayers on the hook for propping up this bank, as well as still making the minimum pension payments, our credit rating, Chicago's credit rating, will plummet and our cost of borrowing will skyrocket.
Going back to my original question, your CPA's license does not really prepare you, does it, or qualify you for public policy and dealing with anti-poverty funds and that sort of thing?
No, what my job is to be able to adequately analyze financial statements where I can then look at a bank and decide, are they actually, and granted, I would have the benefit of CRA ratings, which have been around since 1977, to say, is this bank or credit union or financial institution, are they having the impact that we want? And under the best practices of the Government Finance Officers Association, based here in Chicago, quarterly reviews to see if they are meeting those targets.
Okay, Ms. Conyers-Irvin, you are looking for a job as treasurer at the same time your husband, the alderman, Jason Irvin, is the vice chair of the budget committee. At the very least, there are those who would say that is the appearance of conflict of interest, which can be as serious as an actual conflict of interest. How will that be addressed if you are elected?
Actually, one of the 4 points that I'm proposing as the next city treasurer is to move the Council Office of Financial Analysis to the treasurer's office so that we will be able to provide an independent analysis of the true story of the budget.
But would you circumvent your husband's role as vice chair of the budget committee?
So let me be clear on this. Whether it's my husband or anyone else who's the vice chair of budget, before I met my husband, I was a leader. Before I met my husband, I had an MBA in finance. I had over a decade in the private sector.
Understood,
No.
Conflict
But I
of
want to
interest,
be clear.
But conflict of interest,
no,
you know what
but
that
I want to
is.
be clear that my role as a city treasurer is to hold the mayor accountable, the city council accountable, the financial institution accountable, whomever that is. And I have no problem bringing the financial institutions to my office, as well as my husband and any other alderman, to make certain that we are good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. And I want to be clear on that. I am my own woman, and I have no problem making certain that we are good stewards of taxpayers' finances.
Carol, if the council cannot choose who is providing them with financial analysis, if that goes to an elected office where they cannot then hire or fire the treasurer, which wouldn't be an option as it's an elected office currently, that is essentially absolving the city council of financial responsibility when it comes to their votes, because they could simply say, we asked the treasurer for this, it wasn't what we wanted, and now we're stuck.
How would you address conflicts of interest?
I have no one in my family works in government.
Any kinds of conflicts of interest. You have friends, you have
Sure.
associates.
I have, well, one of the things I would like to see is that the scope of the Inspector General, as far not only with the Treasurer's Office, but all other executive offices and the whole City Council, is increased. Because when it comes to increased management and also service fees from the 48 broker-dealers that we work with in the Treasurer's Office, there should be no question whatsoever whether it is a family member, a friend, a close associate, a business associate, even a passive investment, that there is no way to benefit someone who is in a position for public authority.
Of course, increasing the Inspector General's role requires
the City Council. Correct.
Alderman Pawar, as a former alderman yourself who is seeking this office, how would you address conflicts of interest?
Well, one, I would, first of all, not take a dime from banks and the Illinois Bank. Number two, I think it's important to know that I led the effort to create the City Council Office of Financial Analysis. I also led the efforts to empower Inspector General Joe Ferguson to make sure he has full oversight over council and the committees. Now, that effort didn't go as far enough as it needed to, simply because Chairman Burke was able to change the votes at the last second, and so I had to vote against my own legislation. But I've been leading on these efforts on financial transparency, on transparency of government, and on ethics reform in my time in City Council. And in terms of putting down conflicts of interest and making sure there are none, it's about making sure that there is a real space and a distance between this office and the banks.
And the Council Office of Financial Analysis is ineffective, and it is not timely. which is why I propose that it is done under the Treasurer's Office.
Will you accept money contributions from banks or other financial houses?
Let me say this. There's many individuals and organizations that are investing in my campaign. I will also say I have no problem holding anyone accountable.
I understand that,
Yes.
but will you will accept contributions from banks and financial investment firms?
I will accept contributions that is allowed under the state law.
And Alderman Pawar, you will not?
No.
And Mr. Garrity?
No, absolutely not.
So what investments should the city of Chicago, in your judgment, not be currently involved in? Representative Conyers-Zerman? That they currently are.
Well, I think that when we look at the investment strategy, I think that what I would propose is to look at investment strategies that we should be looking at. Number one, credit unions. I think that when we look at the credit unions, I think that right now, currently, under the ordinance, they are not allowed to be a municipal depository. We know that credit unions, being a local organization within the community, most likely underserved communities, residents have access to the credit unions.
But my question was actually about investment in Chicago.
understand.
So what should we not be investing in that we currently are?
I think that there should be more investments in local organizations, being the credit unions. That is my answer.
But you don't have any problems with the current investments that we have?
In order to invest in the credit unions, we have to make changes with our investment strategy.
Alderman Pawar?
I think we need to have a full divestment from fossil fuels. I just stood today with the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led movement on working with Representative Ocasio-Cortez to make sure that we're moving towards a Green New Deal, thinking about doing our economy around new industries, around green energy, around investing in things like public banks so we can rethink how we do things at a local level. I think also where we're not investing and where we should be investing is refinancing student loans. I see what's happening as alderman, where the nexus of housing instability, student loan debt, and childcare has people from the upper middle class down to the working poor living check to check. Now we can do affordable housing and student loan debt through a public bank, through the Treasurer's Office, and address income inequality in a real way.
Mr. Garrity, what should we not be investing in that we're investing in now?
Sure, I agree. So right now, Treasurer Summers has narrowed down the portfolio to 1% that does contain fossil fuels. And there's a goal of 2020 in Chicago to be carbon free. I agree with continuing along that path with the guidelines set forth by the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. And when it comes to, as Alderman Pawar has been consistent on, student loan debt, student loans in the state of Illinois default at a rate of over 10%. Right now in Chicago, 18% of all of our spending in 2023 will be just on pensions. How we fund higher education in this country is a real issue that has to be tackled, but it should not be tackled on the backs of Chicago taxpayers, where 1/5 of everything they pay will not come back to them in 4 short years.
There's a flip side to not investing and a flip side to boycotts, which is you need the biggest return you can get for the Chicago taxpayer, even if the investment might be, in the eyes of some, controversial. Do you see some controversial investments that we could be making that we have not? Representative Conyers?
I mentioned about municipal depositories, including credit unions. I think that that's important for us to look at. And let me tell you why. We talk a lot about numbers here, and I hear that a lot in this treasurer's race. But we need to talk about numbers that are relevant to taxpayers. Let's talk about Chicagoans. Over 40% of Chicagoans being in debt. That's what I want to talk about. Let's talk about the percentage of Chicagoans being unbanked and underbanked. You never hear that in this dialogue.
And you regard that as controversial to most people?
Absolutely, because it's bringing financial institutions to the table, holding them accountable. Let's talk about the office of the treasurer on day one, what we can do. All of these concepts. We need to talk about what's relevant to taxpayers.
Alderman Pawar, your view on credit unions?
I think, I'm a sponsor on the legislation to make sure that we can capitalize credit unions and other community development organizations. That was an ordinance led by Kurt Summers and Alderman Arena, and that got a brick put on it by Chairman Burke. There's a municipal depositories ordinance to make sure that, I'm a sponsor on that, to make sure that we are properly bidding out our services so that banks can bank with us. That again, Chairman Burke put a brick on it. So there are lots of reforms, and I agree with Representative Conyers-Ervin, is that we need to bank the unbanked, but we need to tackle income inequality across the spectrum, and using our financial and investment power to do that follows two tracks. We can either do it from a legislative perspective, which we are, and now we can use our investment power to change corporate boardroom behavior, and that's why we need an activist treasurer.
So when it comes to the city's pension boards, which I think you raised first, you will sit on them, and those treasurers who've sat on them over the years have not always chosen the wisest investments, including one involving Mayor Daley's nephew. What concrete proposals do you have to prevent those kinds of pension investment?
Sure. So you're right. The city treasurer is the only elected official to sit on all 4 of those city pension funds. And so the responsibility of those funds is to their beneficiaries to make sure that despite their unfunded status, they are generating what they need. Obviously, that was a poor decision in that I think it was a $52 million loss in that real estate disaster. But where the treasurer's job is to look out for taxpayers.
So what's the proposal?
I think that what we should be doing, there has to be far greater vetting, and there should be even considerations whether or not it's the IG, whether or not it's the third-party auditors who currently audit each of those pension funds, to be looking into the board members and those who are making investment decisions, because there was a political consideration, obviously, that was driving that investment.
But looking into the board members, they're board members of those pension funds. I mean, how much latitude does any treasurer have in figuring that out and picking and choosing? Alderman Pawar?
I mean, you're one of the voices on the board. So I think part of it is about making sure that we're guiding the pension boards as a voice, as a vote, to say we should be steering our economic investment back into our neighborhoods. We should be steering our economic investments into companies, away from companies that pollute our environment, away from big pharma, there are lots of companies who are just outed as going to large consulting companies to find ways to get people more addicted to opiates. So there's a way
But we're looking for what you can do as a treasurer on that. Representative Conyers-Ervin, this is a citywide race, and yet most people don't know you guys. People know each of you from...
the polling has it at 60% undecided in our race.
Exactly. So in the little time that remains, what could you tell those watching about you? Just one thing that they don't know and might surprise them.
That I have an MBA in finance and over a decade of experience in the private sector.
Okay, Alderman Pawar.
I'm born and raised in Chicago.
That I've spent and dedicated my life to social and economic justice, and my approach in the Treasurer's office would be no different.
And Peter Garrity?
Yes. Oh, Garrity.
Garrity, forgive me for saying
rhymes
that.
with therapy.
Therapy,
if that
I know.
helps.
I
Thank
put
you.
a T where it didn't belong.
No problem. So my wife and I, we have our 2 young children. We live in Chicago's First Ward. I'm running because we need to make sure Chicago is affordable. And the way that happens...
No, but what do they not know about you? You've already said that
sure.
stuff.
I would say what they don't know about me is that I was actually recruited into this race by the progressive chair, or the chair of the Progressive Caucus, Alderman Scott Wagaspack. He believes in having a financial professional in this office, and that's essential to the city's next 4 years.
Peter Garrity, Melissa Conyers-Ervin, and Amaya Pawar, thank you very much for joining us in Chicago tonight. Much more ahead. Please stay with us.
Still to come on Chicago tonight, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, on his new memoir and why his sights are set on the White House. A big week in endorsements and campaign cash for Bill Daley, but how will it impact the race for mayor? And behind the curtain of the Joffrey's newest ballet, Anna Karenina. But first, a growing number of Venezuelans fleeing the turmoil in their country are finding a new life here where they're keeping a close eye on their homeland and with hopes that change is about to take place. Eddie Aruzza reports.
At one of the handful of Venezuelan restaurants in Chicago this week, some members of that community gathered to watch a celebration in their homeland. It was the annual commemoration of the Day of the Youth, a national holiday in Venezuela. And it was headlined by the young, self-declared interim president of the country, Juan Guaidó. For one recent arrival to Chicago, it was an encouraging sight in his beleaguered country.
I'm really hopeful because in a lot of time we have been through a lot of situations we're being changing, but this is the most positive assertive one we have in a long time.
With the collapse of Venezuela's economic and social structures, Illinois has become the new home of a growing number of Venezuelans. Many, like 32-year-old Luciana Diaz, who worked as a radio reporter in her home country, say they had no choice but to leave for their own safety.
All the violence who happened in my city, it was very dangerous, so you really don't have like a social life there. So my mom and my dad was worried about me, and they said, you know what, I have friends in Chicago, it's better you go there to study and maybe you can start a new life.
Venezuela has been on a downward spiral for the last 5 years after the oil-rich country began unreeling when oil prices started to plummet. Food and medicine shortages have reached critical levels, while hyperinflation has left many Venezuelans in desperate conditions. Ana Gil Garcia is a native of Venezuela who's lived in Chicago for nearly 30 years. She teaches at Northeastern Illinois University. She returns to her homeland frequently and says she barely recognizes her once wealthy country.
And there is a system in which everybody knows, oh, in such town they are selling today toilet paper, and then you see people since 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, just lining up just to get toilet paper that day.
At the center of Venezuela's crisis is Nicolás Maduro, the authoritarian leader who's been president since 2013 and who's refused calls to step down. The U.S. and 60 other nations say they no longer consider him the country's legitimate leader. Most observers say the elections in Venezuela last May, in which Maduro won, were not conducted according to the country's constitution, and therefore Maduro is holding power illegitimately.
The Constitution says that in the absence of the president, then the president of the National Assembly, which is the Congress, becomes the president, the interim president of the country.
The current leader of Venezuela's National Assembly is Juan Guaidó, who until recently was virtually unknown outside his country. The standoff between the opposing forces supporting Guaidó and Maduro is reaching a boiling point. While a humanitarian crisis grows even more grave, Maduro has blocked international aid from entering the country. In a meeting with the president of Colombia at the White House today, President Trump affirmed his support for Guaidó, but would not say how the U.S. might respond to the growing crisis in Venezuela.
I've seen what's happened in the streets, and I've seen what's happened with executions, so I really give him a lot of credit.
One of the new Venezuelans in Chicago, however, is unequivocal about what she believes needs to happen for change to come to her country.
Do you support U.S. military action?
Yeah, I support that.
Over the last 4 years, an estimated 2.5 million Venezuelans have left their country. Andres Weg says he had to flee after being kidnapped 4 times.
You walk around the street and somebody park around next to you and take you inside of the car and let's go to the ATMs and take as much cash as we can from the ATMs. That's a call in my country like secuestro express or express kidnapping.
For her part, Professor Ana Gil Garcia began an organization called the Illinois-Venezuela Alliance that sends food and medicine to her native country.
In December, I was there for 20 days, 25 days, and I was feeling so hopeless. I was looking for something to give because my family and me, we knew that going out to the street was about, just having children asking you for something to eat.
Many of Chicago's Venezuelans watching the events unfolding in their country believe that change is coming soon, maybe even within a matter of weeks. But some, like Luciana Diaz, who wants the best for her country, says she's found a new home.
Of course, Chicago is my city now. I think I'm not going to come back, but I'm going to try to help from here.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Eddie Aruza.
Chicago had a Venezuelan consulate until January 23rd. That's when President Trump announced the U.S. no longer recognizes Nicolas Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate president, and the country promptly closed its diplomatic outposts here. Harvard grad, Rhodes Scholar, Navy veteran, two-term mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and now a presidential hopeful. That's 37-year-old Pete Buttigieg, who recently joins the growing list of Democrats looking at running for president in 2020. But for now, he goes by Mayor Pete, and just this week he published a memoir. It's called Shortest Way Home: One Mayor's Challenge and a Model for America's Future. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg joins us now, and welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Thanks for having me on. I have to mention that this program and this station are one of a handful of institutions my mother believes in. It's her birthday today, so I think she'll be pleased to know that I'm here.
Duly noted. Thank you, Mayor. You've launched an exploratory committee for the 2020 presidential race. When do you plan to make it official that you are, in fact, a candidate?
Well, we're still putting a number of steps in place just from a legal perspective and finance perspective, but based on our recent trip to Iowa and everything else we've seen in terms of a response both at the public level and just from supporters, all systems or all indications are pointing toward all systems go. And
basic question, the pronunciation of your name. I think I came close to maybe getting it right. How do you pronounce it?
Buttigieg. It's my father's name. It's actually very common on the island of Malta. He emigrated to this country in the 70s to get an education and then decided to become a U.S. citizen.
So you're 37, you've just released this memoir. Why a memoir at your age? Some people might think a little early for a memoir.
Well, my real objective was to tell not just my own story, but the story of South Bend. You know, a lot of people have associations around South Bend. They know about the University of Notre Dame, for example. What they may not realize is that we were an industry town. We really were built up around the auto industry. And when Studebaker stopped making cars in 1963, our town nearly collapsed. So I think the story of how South Bend, especially in recent years, has come back from being proclaimed in Newsweek as a dying city at the beginning of the decade, the month I got into the race, to now being one that's really resurgent, growing in terms of population and the economy. I think it's a powerful response to others, including the White House, who would suggest that the only formula for the industrial Midwest is nostalgia and resentment and the idea of looking backward and trying to turn back the clock.
So what has happened in South Bend since you become mayor that in your mind makes it for a rebirth?
Well, we tackled a lot of our toughest challenges by coming together. We had a massive issue with vacant and abandoned properties and wound up dealing with 1,000 vacant and abandoned houses in 1,000 days. But we also developed a new economic vision. I had to be honest when I was running that nothing resembling Studebaker was ever going to come back, but we were, and we talked about how.
People think it might
Sometimes people said, you know, what this city really needs is some version of that. But it just wasn't going to happen. Now, we're still doing manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. That's a good thing, and we're proud of it. But one of the biggest recent additions of union auto jobs in our area was actually making electric vehicles for a Silicon Valley-based startup that's funded largely by investors from China. It's a different world than the one that was built when Studebaker became a major American company. And for a community like ours in the industrial Midwest, trying to make sure we succeed in the 21st century, that's not such a bad thing. We just have to be willing to embrace change and make sure that it works for American workers.
You were a member of the U.S. Naval Reserves and you served in Afghanistan for 7 months. What did that experience do for you?
Well, I learned a lot. First of all, I think it really cemented my understanding of why politics matters. When you're sent into a war on the orders of a U.S. president, you never again underestimate the importance of decisions that are made in Washington. I also learned how to work and get along with fellow Americans who had radically different backgrounds and experiences and politics than mine. But when we were getting into a vehicle to go outside the wire, they didn't care whether I was going home to a boyfriend or a girlfriend or what country my father immigrated from or what my politics were. They just wanted to know that I could do my job and vice versa. I think we need more of that kind of trust building, and it shouldn't require going to war in order to get it. It's one of the reasons I think that national service is something we should invest in more for a coming generation of Americans at a time when American national unity and social cohesion is really being frayed.
During your campaign for your second term, you came out via an op-ed. You came out as gay. Why did you do it that way?
You know, it's one of those things that you're ready when you're ready. There's a part of me that wished I didn't have to come out at all. I mean, straight people don't have to come out, and my hope is that someday we'll live in a world where somebody in my position would just show up at some event, would have a date of the same sex, everybody would notice, shrug, and move on. But, you know, in 2015, in the middle of a re-election campaign, when I became personally ready to come out, at a time, by the way, when Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. So I did what I often do. I put my thoughts down in writing, sent it to the South Bend Tribune, and then hope for the best.
And the reaction to that?
You know, we didn't know what to expect, but the reaction was great. There was a little bit of ugliness, especially online, but honestly, most of the reaction fell into two categories. People who went out of their way to express support, some people who explained that they were in the same boat, kids who said that I had made it a little easier for them to get through high school, and then another group, maybe even bigger, who basically made it clear that they didn't care. They just wanted a mayor who would plow the snow and fill in the potholes and promote economic development and handle emergencies well and all the things you expect of a mayor. So even in a socially conservative community like ours, when the election did happen, I won with 80% of the vote, and I think it demonstrated that people really were prepared, as I had hoped but couldn't have known for sure. People really were prepared just to judge me based on the job that I did for the people of South Bend.
You mentioned Mike Pence. What was your relationship like with Mike Pence? Did he know you were gay?
Not until I came out.
Right,
then you bet. Yeah, I'm sure he
but did you interact with him after you came out?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've worked with 3 Republican governors in Indiana. Part of the mayor's job is to work with the governor or anybody else who can help you serve the people of your community on issues where we agreed, like when it was possible to contribute to economic development, then we teamed up. When it came to things like the so-called Religious Freedom Act that basically legalized or attempted to legalize discrimination in the state, then of course I stood up to him, as did, by the way, a coalition of mayors and business leaders, Republicans and Democrats, who really turned the tide on that issue.
One of the questions that you're asked since you formed this exploratory committee is the whole question of your experience. A mayor has never gone directly from being mayor to being president of the United States. What's your experience that qualifies you to be president?
Well, this may be an audacious thing to say as the youngest person in this conversation, but I think experience is one of the main reasons for me to look at this. Look, my experience is that of guiding a community through an economic transformation and holding executive office in government where you have to do the same kinds of things that are required at the highest executive office, holding a group of people together as well as implementing good policy. At the end of the day, I have more years of government experience under my belt than the president. I have more executive experience than the vice president, and I have more military experience than anybody who's arrived in that job on the first day since George H.W. Bush.
By virtue of your having served in the reserves and your 7 months of active duty in Afghanistan, there are potentially 25 or so candidates running for president. How are you going to distinguish yourself besides being the youngest, being the only openly gay candidate? What else?
It's pretty safe to say I'm not like the others. Now, profile is one thing. I'm definitely the only left-handed Maltese American Episcopalian gay millennial war veteran in the race, but I think profile is just what gets you that first look. Then it comes down to what you have to say. My message is one about freedom, democracy, and security. Each one of those is a word that nobody could really be against, but when you unpack those, in my view, they lead to specific commitments that progressives are doing a better job of meeting than conservatives, whether it's freedom, like the freedom to be able to start a new business because leaving your job doesn't mean losing your health care, or for that matter, freedom to marry the person you love. Or democracy, which I think is being called into question, and it's even possible that my generation could be the first ever to see America grow less democratic instead of more over the course of our lifetimes. We've got to deal with things not only like redistricting and money in politics, but things that don't get talked about as much, like whether a country with an electoral college can really call itself democratic at all. And third, security, which in my view includes 21st century security considerations. Things like cybersecurity, climate security, election security, as well as things like border security or counterterrorism, which I worked on in the military.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And happy birthday to your mom. Again, the book is called Shortest Way Home, One Mayor's Challenge and Model for America's Future. You can read an excerpt on our website. And back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
Well, the money is starting to flow into campaign accounts with less than 2 weeks until the mayoral election. Meanwhile, Springfield's favorite parlor game these days is guessing exactly what taxes will have to go up in the coming year's budget. Our political team of Amanda Vinicky, Paris Schutz, and Carol Marine take us behind the scenes once again in this week's edition of Spotlight Politics. Colleagues, good to be gathered with you as always. Bill Daley received the Chicago Tribune's endorsement. Carol, you've seen a few of these endorsements. What's the potential impact in a race where there are, what, 14 candidates?
With 14 candidates and where voter turnout thus far in early voting appears to be depressed because people can't seem to make up their mind, perhaps this will help some of those who go to the editorial boards, in which case the Tribune has endorsed Bill Daley, the Sun-Times has endorsed Lori Lightfoot, and Cranes is still out there not yet endorsing. We'll wait and see. I'm not convinced that voters are looking to the editorial boards to make their decision.
Paris, you reported on the turnout in early voting. Remind us what's going on.
It's lower than normal for this kind of election, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a low voter turnout when all is said and done. In fact, Jim Allen at the Board of Elections says there are indications that it might be a higher than normal turnout on Election Day. But as Carol said, people are just confused. They're waiting for more stories in this Burke investigation. They're waiting for some kind of guidance. But there's, I think,
they're
close
waiting for the WTTW forums is what they're waiting for.
There's a record number
Good point.
Yeah.
a record number of vote-by-mail applications, which seems to suggest to election authorities that there is heavy interest in this race.
Amanda, Ken Griffin,
Illinois' richest man.
he is worth, what, $4 or $5 billion, something? Who knows? If you have to count, you don't know.
Cool
Just donated $1 million to Bill Daley. Does that mean Bill Daley is seen as sort of the business establishment's candidate?
It certainly is a signal, perhaps, from Griffin to other business folk that he should be. This is an interesting contribution in that already Bill Daley was at the top of the fundraising game. That puts him over the $7.4 million mark. Today, I, in fact, asked Bill Daley about that. He says, you know, he's proud to get that money from Ken Griffin, even as other candidates are accusing him of being a Rauner-esque candidate, because Griffin, of course, also heavily backed the former Republican governor. So is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing for Daley? I mean, $1 million, he'll be able to spend that to hit the airwaves. Some people will certainly be turned off by it, but he says he's proud of it, and that Ken Griffin, when you're that rich, you don't need anything from the mayor. So Daley says we need not be concerned about any sort of, you know, payback or conflict of interest issue.
Ken Griffin also gave heavily to Rahm Emanuel. So he spreads his money around.
He's given money to the Obama Foundation,
yes,
and he covers a lot of bases.
He's quite a bipartisan guy. And so the fact of the matter is that I don't know what you deduce from that, but I do think that the Tribune editorial board may have paid attention to Ken Griffin's investment as well. But what did Rahm Emanuel spend on his first election? It was tens of millions of dollars.
And
Bill Daley's at $7 million.
And
right
then a lot
now.
of the same donors too, Carol. And Bill Daley is at $7 million. He's lapping the field in fundraising. The next closest is Toni Preckwinkle, around $4 million or so. A lot of her money is from public employee unions. So what's happening here, the two big constituencies with money and action in Chicago are always the public sector unions and the business community. And it looks like it's going to come down to a choice between those two interests again.
Well, at least in terms of money. I mean,
in terms of
I'm
money.
sorry,
I'm
I gotta
not
say,
saying
this is right.
not in a runoff, but in terms of money and people
So many
trying
candidates,
to get
who
out
knows
the
where
vote.
this is going to go?
I mean, let's talk about what's happening at the statewide level. There's rumors of a potential temporary increase in the state income tax. Tell us about that.
Well, as we heard this week from both the Commercial Club and from the Civic Federation, there is just a need to do something, anything about Illinois' financial situation. And again, sooner than later. That's where this rises from, because Pritzker, of course, wants a progressive income tax, graduated income tax. That can't happen under the state constitution. So that's going to take a couple of years. Something that was talked about during the campaign was raise the overall tax rate and then give some sort of tax credit to people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. This is something that Pritzker said no to, actually, when WTTW and others first asked him about
Dan Hines, one of his deputy governors, was on the show last night unequivocally saying, no, that would not be fair. So unless they're changing their mind, it's hard to believe that that's the route they're going to go.
And at the same time, he's promised a balanced budget and promised to tackle Illinois' issues.
Marijuana
And that's going to be
gaming,
so, that ain't going to do it. He spent that money
Not
like
gonna do
5
it.
times over already.
Carol, as you know, one of the things that was in the news this week was the bridge problems on Lakeshore Drive. Does that create any urgency for the state to pass a capital bill?
Yes, and it has to, because everybody can remember that Minnesota bridge that went straight down. And I think Rahm Emanuel, when you saw his face looking at that bridge and his engineers, yes and yes, but that goes back to the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club and the Civic Federation saying, you know, snap out of it, people. We don't even like these kinds of solutions. We are the, you know,
These are the business titans.
We are the eminent
We need to pay higher taxes is what they're saying.
And when they're saying it, my God.
Colleagues, that's where we'll have to leave it. Amanda Paris, Carol, thank you as always. Tonight, Chicago's biggest ballet buffs are witnessing the first steps of a brand new ballet based on the classic Russian novel Anna Karenina. While the dancers on stage are experts at making their performances look easy, developing an entirely new ballet from prelude to encore is no easy task. But the Joffrey Ballet took a big leap this season, unveiling entirely new music, choreography, and costumes for this production. Brandis Friedman takes us behind the curtain.
At this rehearsal, opening night is just a week and a half away.
This is diagonal. Do more forward, forward, forward.
And choreographer Yuri Pozakov is keeping dancers on their toes.
I never think about good rehearsal or bad rehearsal. For me, it's working process.
At this rehearsal, leading dancers Victoria Gianni and Alberto Velasquez are rehearsing the beginning of Act 2 of the Russian classic Anna Karenina.
When Anna is feverish and goes in and out of consciousness almost, and it loses herself in what's reality and what is her maybe thoughts, imagination. So the tensions are high because it's a moment where Karenin, her husband, and Vronsky, her lover, are sort of in one room together. So I think in her head, she wants all to be okay, for it all to be good, and that's just not the case.
This ballet has been in the works for a couple of years, and today is the first day these dancers are rehearsing in costume.
I think for me it's important to have costumes on almost every day from now on, because it's in a way it's a period piece, you know, so the costumes are very unusual to a typical, you know, ballet dancer. They're big and flowy and massive and stunning.
Because the partnering is quite difficult. So sometimes when you create things or work on things without the costume, everything works very well. But once you put the costume on, it's like a complete different feeling.
This particular feeling has never been created before on stage. That's because the Joffrey commissioned entirely new choreography from Pozakov. He enlisted a fellow Russian, composer Ilya Demutsky, for an entirely new score. And though the dancers are rehearsing to music,
3.
they'll only hear the full score as performed by an orchestra just a couple of days before opening night, meaning limited time to rehearse with the full score.
Those melodies are there, but they may be imagining a piano sound and later it's going to be a flute sound. That's going to be a little bit just of an adjustment for them to make.
Meanwhile, there are costume fittings.
Much better. It's like getting that confidence.
And props and pieces of the set lining the halls of the Joffrey. At this rehearsal, there's also another cast of dancers behind Victoria and Alberto. There's a total of 3 casts performing on different nights of the week.
I'm looking forward because I think it's very important time for process when we're bringing everything together. Like you said, it's costume, it's a design coming and light designing and everything. So everything gonna be unpredictable.
Building a new ballet from prelude to curtain call can cost well into the millions of dollars. So Joffrey partnered with the Australian Ballet to share the costs, a routine more companies are practicing.
I think it is a way for us to be able to, wanting to create, in this case, new narrative language. And a full-length evening is a lot more expensive.
For Victoria, who's danced with the Joffrey for 16 years, this is the role of a lifetime, in part because she grew up admiring Yuri Pozakov on stage when she was a young dancer in the Republic of Georgia, formerly of the Soviet Union.
I used to get his signature, you know, when I was a little girl, just sort of, he had no idea who I was, but, you know, he used to like sign my book, and I would come back in a line and do it again, flip the page. So I had multiple signatures of him, and, you know, just for him to be here and create Anna Karenina for the Joffrey and on me and on Alberta, it's just been so exciting. It's so inspiring.
Yes, I love this way. He just comes in and he hears the music, and you can see in his eyes that everything is coming together in his head, and then he tells us what to do, and I don't know how he does. It's amazing.
He gets inspired in a moment. Just inspiration is there, and you know that sheer, he has to create, it has to come out. It just has, it's coming out of his
And it
core.
makes sense.
The company hopes that it will all make sense to the audience when this production of Anna Karenina takes to the stage for the first time tonight. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And Anna Karenina open tonight. Just 9 more performances are playing at the Auditorium Theater until February 24th. And that is our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. We will have our first of 3 mayoral candidate forums with Bob Fioretti, Jerry Joyce, John Kozlar, and Neil Sales-Griffin. And be sure to be with us Monday and Tuesday nights when we talk with the rest of the candidates for mayor. Those programs will be simulcast on WBEZ 91.5 FM. And as always, you can watch live on WTTW.com/news and on Facebook and YouTube. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, proud sponsors of the National Hellenic Museum's Trial of Hippocrates on February 20th, where Robert Clifford will be participating in the open to the public mock trial.